item number 72, Order M-159, second reading of Bill 159, an act to proclaim Simcoe Day. Mr. Barrett.
Call from Norfolk.
Thank you, Speaker, and I move second reading of Bill 159, an act to proclaim Simcoe Day.
Mr. Barrett has moved second reading of Bill 159, an act to proclaim Simcoe Day. Pursuant to Standing Order 98, the member has 12 minutes for his presentation.
Speaker, and you know, there's so many stories of well over 2 centuries ago were relayed this past September 17th at Niagara-on-the-Lake. Several events were held to commemorate the 225th anniversary of the opening of Canada's first Parliament by Lieutenant Governor John Graves Simcoe. On September 12th this fall, on the 226th anniversary of the appointment of John Graves Simcoe as Lieutenant Governor in 1791, I rose in this House to introduce legislation proclaiming the first Monday of each August as Simcoe Day. Recognize his contributions to our province and his role in creating the first foremost structures of democracy in our country. Among Canadian holidays, the August long weekend could be said to lack a distinct identity. The May long weekend commemorates Queen Victoria, but many parts of the province, the day off in August is referred to by a somewhat uninspiring moniker of civic holiday. John Graves Simcoe founded Toronto. That city recognizes Simcoe by naming the first Monday Simcoe Day. This private member's bill is titled Simcoe Day Act is intended to bring some awareness of what Simcoe had accomplished. Some might interpret this bill as mandating municipalities to adopt or change their local recognition of what they've named in the past. For example, Ottawa's Colonel By Day or Burlington's Joseph Brant Day, but this legislation does not do that. The proposed legislation, under my direction and according to legal counsel, who drafted the bill, it's voluntary. It only proclaims the first Monday in August. And I do repeat, those municipalities who already have the first Monday in August recognized will not be affected, and those municipalities that wish to opt out down the road can do so if they so choose. So, just to be sure, I had an opportunity this week to revise the bill to read as such, and I quote, "The first Monday in August in each year is proclaimed as Simcoe Day unless a bylaw of a municipality specifies otherwise for the municipality." And if you've been around Burlington for any length of time, you would be familiar with the name Joseph Brant, a Mohawk military political leader of the late 1700s, and Burlington has the first Monday in August in his honour. Closely related, Emancipation Day, established in Ontario in 2008. It falls on August 1st. Many will know John Graves Simcoe banned the importation of slaves into what is now Ontario back in 1793. During my research, I developed quite an appreciation or an admiration for John Graves Simcoe, his leadership with the Queen's Rangers against George Washington's Army, its creation of core institutions that anchor the success of present-day Ontario. He was born February 25th, 1752, 265 years ago in England. John Graves Simcoe, although best known as Ontario's first Lieutenant Governor, he was also a member of British Parliament. He was a colonial administrator, an Army officer, as I mentioned, commander of the Queen's Rangers during the Revolutionary War. At age 24, Simcoe did go to war in America to fight the revolutionaries. His regiment arrived from Britain in June 1775 to take part in the siege of Boston 2 days after the Battle of Bunker Hill. Simcoe assumed command of the elite Queen's Rangers on October 15th, 1777, was largely composed of loyalists and deserters from George Washington's army. The Queen's Rangers were named in tribute to Queen Charlotte, the wife of King George III. It was a 400-man elite fighting force, first established in the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, They trained in woodcraft and scouting, guerrilla warfare. Simcoe didn't follow the protocol of the time of strict and rigid maneuvers. The Rangers wore green uniforms for camouflage, depended on speed and surprise, and were known to defeat forces 3 times their size. Simcoe and his Rangers fought alongside Benedict Arnold at Richmond, and in the winter of 1779 spared the life of Washington himself by allowing Washington and several others to escape without firing upon them. Simcoe was wounded several times during battle. He had his horse shot out from under him. He was held a prisoner of war and then was paroled by Benjamin Franklin. Simcoe took the time from the war to pursue a young lady named Sally Townsend. February 14, 1779, he sent her a poem in which he extolled her beauty and his love for her, and this is the first recorded Valentine's Day letter in North America. Following the defeat of the British at Yorktown in 1781, Simcoe spirited the Queen's Rangers colours to England. Today they're on display in the officers' mess of the Queen's Rangers here at Fort York in Toronto. You know, there's a television production out there on AMC. It's called Turn. And so far, the most villainous villain in this series is Captain Simcoe, played by Samuel Rowkin. And one of AMC's behind-the-scenes promotional videos features with the creator, Craig Silverstern, telling us that there's something a little wrong with Simcoe, and Rowkin describes him as basically a sociopath. Speaker, I consider this an egregious an example, a portrayal of Simcoe through character assassination, and oftentimes the silver screen in portraying war does require a villain. So, going back to the Revolutionary War, when it wrapped up, Simcoe returned to England, married Elizabeth Postuma Gilliam, and was elected Member of Parliament for the borough of St. Mawes in Cornwall. Lady Simcoe left a valuable record of life in Upper Canada through her letters, her diary. She was an accomplished watercolorist and a sketch artist, skillfully chronicled her travels in Upper Canada. So, going back, as we know, September the 12th, 1791, Simcoe was appointed Lieutenant Governor of the newly created Upper Canada. With his appointment, he articulated a goal to develop Upper Canada as a model community with aristocratic and conservative principles, and to demonstrate the superiority of these ideas in contrast to the republicanism of the United States. The first session of the First Parliament opened September 17, 1791. Presentation of the Speech of the Throne by Lieutenant Governor Simcoe. The first action of the House of Assembly was to elect unanimously John MacDonnell as Speaker. MacDonnell was a veteran of Colonel John Butler's Rangers and the representative sent from Glengarry. Present-day MPP Jim MacDonnell has a close connection, and I'm a descendant of John Butler. I carry his middle name. So, just to back up a bit again, the Constitutional Act of June 10, 1791 divided the British colony into 2 governments. West of the Ottawa River, Upper Canada, the lower reaches of the St. Lawrence became Lower Canada, but we did not see Ontario's first Parliament meet until a year later in Newark, now Niagara-on-the-Lake. And it sat under the Great Seal and the Mace of Upper Canada that were created in 1791. Those elected to the House of Assembly for the first Parliament were representative of the colony. Most arrived after the American Revolution. They served in the militia, the regular forces, and were fiercely loyal to Great Britain and the monarchy. The appointed legislative councillors of Upper Canada, unlike the elected settlers, tend to come from the British Isles, and they're chosen partly for their success in business or government. Several important acts were passed: English civil law, trial by jury, building of a courthouse and a jail in every district, the introduction of a standard system of weights and measures. Within days, Ephraim Jones of Grenville had introduced legislation calling for the establishment of trial by jury and the destruction of wolves. Jeremiah French of Stormont wanted better regulation of surveyors, their fees, and jurisdiction. Some things haven't changed. Taxes were proposed on wine and spirits, and anti-smuggling legislation was introduced. The new legislature authorized town meetings, laid the structure for municipal government, and significantly, a year later, 1793, Simcoe's Legislative Council passed, and I quote, an act to prevent further introduction of slaves and to limit the terms of contracts of servitude within this province, first such legislation in the British Empire. Settlers in the capital were mostly refugees from the American War of Independence, veterans of Butler's Rangers and Loyalists, and with their families arrived along with their indentured servants or their slaves. After 1793, a slave entering Upper Canada would be free. Children born to slaves after 1793 became free at age 25. They were treated equally under the law and the government. Their vote was sought in elections. They won lawsuits. Their children attended public schools and they were able to buy houses. It remains unclear exactly where the first setting of this legislature was held. Cases are made for Navy Hall, Butler's Barracks, Masonic Lodge, a large marquee tent pitched under what is now known as Parliament Oak. Simcoe soon realized Newark was an unsuitable capital because it was on the border and open to attack. He recommended moving it to a defensible position, named the location London, renamed the river the Thames. This proposal was rejected, like a lot of his ideas, by Britain, but Simcoe's second choice, present site of Toronto, was accepted. The capital was moved there in 1793 and renamed York. On September 17, 1992, let's fast forward, 130 MPPs went by bus to the place where our first provincial parliament convened to commemorate the 200th anniversary, attended by Bob Ray, Lynn MacLeod, Mike Harris, Lieutenant Governor Henry Jackman. They planted a tree. They retired for tea at Navy Hall. So to wrap up, John Gray Simcoe lived his life by the family coat of arms, non sibi sed patri, which means not for self but for country. This is the motto of my alma mater, Simcoe District High School, and all our sports jerseys have that Latin inscription on them. Every kid in that school knows that Latin phrase. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Further debate.